Welcome to geometry. So geometry is a mathematical system. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with a few basic building blocks, and then everything that comes out of that can be proven, although that's for a higher level course, maybe like in college. So there's three main building blocks for geometry. And those are a point, a line, and a plane. And so I want to go through each of those. So a point is going to be something, it doesn't have any size, it just has a location. So somewhere we can put a point. So for example, when I actually created this point, using my software, it does have a size. You could measure how far across it is. But we have to think of a point conceptually as just a dot, and we can't measure it. It's just somewhere in a specific location. The second one is a line, and a line is a straight, continuous arrangement of infinitely many points. And I can't stress that enough, infinitely many points. So there's so many points that we can't count them. Now, the line also, though, we can't measure in terms of its thickness or its length. So here's an example of a line. Now, if I want to refer to this line, I have to label at least two of the points. Now, there's a lot more points than just these two. So I could make a whole bunch of points. But when we're drawing a line, we don't need to have a whole bunch of points on it. You just have to make sure you have at least two of them with labels. And for labels, we use a capital letter. So a single point, we're going to use a capital letter of the alphabet, like P. And then for a line, we have to at least label 2 points with capital letters for each of those points. And then the notation for a line is you're going to write the 2 letters and then draw a little line right above it. And it doesn't matter the order. So we can call this line, I'm using an arrow. We can call it line AB, or we can call it line BA. So it doesn't matter which letter we use first. The order will be important later on when we talk about some other terms. So for a point, we just use a single capital letter, and for a line, we use 2 letters with a line symbol above it. And then the third type of building block for geometry is a plane. And a plane is a flat surface, kind of like a desktop. You can think of that as a plane if it kept going forever and ever in all directions. There's no thickness to the plane, though. So if you're in a room, you can look and say, oh, the ceiling represents a plane. If it kept going outside of the room forever and ever in all directions. Or a wall can represent a plane. And so when we draw a plane, we can't draw something that goes on forever. So what we do is we draw something that looks like this, kind of looks like a parallelogram, which we'll define later, and then we put a big capital letter somewhere in the corner, one of the corners, doesn't matter which one. And so if I want to refer to this plane, let me get an orange pen, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say plane and then that capital letter, plane P. So it's important to understand that this capital letter is not a point. P doesn't represent a point. P represents the plane. So when you see a picture like this with a letter inside and there's not a dot, the letter refers to the name of the plane. So we would call this plane P. So the point, the line, and the plane, those are all undefined terms. I didn't really give a definition. I kind of explained what they were. And that's how we start with our geometry system. All right, so let's see if you understand that. And this is a good example where you probably want to hit pause and write down what you think the answer is, and then hit play and see if you got it correct. All right, so we want to use notation for the first thing. Well, what is this? It's a line, and for a line we need 2 letters. So I'm going to write 2 letters, the 2 points, H and F, and then we put a line symbol above it with arrows on both ends. Now, if you happen to have done it in the opposite order, if you said F and then H with the arrow, that's also correct. So either one of those is fine. There's 2 different correct answers. How about for the next one? What do we have? Well, we have a plane, and so you have to write the word plane, and then you have to put the capital letter. So that's referred to as plane Q. And then lastly, what do we have over here on the right? Well, that's just a single point, and the way we name a point is by the capital letter next to the point. So that's just D. How do we do? All right, so let's keep going. Now we have some defined terms that we can deal with. So defined terms, we have a segment, and a segment is part of a line. It's a portion of a line consisting of 2 points, which we call the endpoints, and then all the points that are between them. So here's an example of a segment. So you can think of it as, well, there was a line here, and it kept going forever and ever and ever, and there's a whole bunch of points, you know, on this line everywhere. Points, 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 infinite number of points. And so what we're doing is we're taking only a section of that line, and we're stopping at a point there, and we're stopping at a point there. And so that's a segment. So A and B are the end points of that segment. Now in terms of the notation for a segment, it's kind of like a line. You need the end points, A and B, or B and A, the order doesn't matter, and then this time you put a bar above them, no arrows. Let me highlight this with a arrow. There's no arrows on the ends of this. It's just a segment with no arrows. So that's how you tell the difference between a segment and a line. If I were referring to a line AB, then I would have written AB and arrows on both ends. But this stops at A and it stops at B. So that's all we have. All right, let's go to another object in geometry that's defined. A ray is also part of a line. It starts at a point called an end point. Now this only has one end point, and then it goes forever in the other direction. So in order to think of this, let me just draw a regular line. So if this was our line, okay, that would be line AB. So what we're doing is we're erasing part of that. We stop at a point, and so now our our ray starts at A, and then it goes towards B. So it starts at A, that's the end point, and then it goes in this direction forever and ever. So we need another point. Any point along here will work. So we have to have at least another one labeled, and then this is going to be ray AB. Over here, we have an end point T, and then it goes forever and ever and ever in this direction, and so we have another point on the ray labeled N, and so that's going to be ray TN. And so that's the notation we use. Now here, we get a little picky. We weren't picky with segments. With segments, it didn't matter if we started with the A or the B when we were writing it. Same thing for a line. But with a ray, you have to write it with the end point letter first. So in this case, A goes first, and then any other point that's on the ray, and then above it, we're drawing an arrow. We're drawing like a segment, and then an arrow on the right side of it. There's no arrow on the left side. And so it doesn't matter in the picture. I can spin this around maybe. Oh, not so well. Let me draw a new one. If, let's say my ray happened to look like this, and A was here, and then B was somewhere over here, this would still be the correct way to name this ray. So it doesn't matter in the picture which direction the ray is going, if it's going to the right or to the left or up or down, you still always write it this way. The endpoint letter goes first, that would be A, and then any other point on the ray, in this case B, but we always draw the arrow pointing to the right above those two letters. So, and that's usually where students tend to make a mistake. So you can't write it as ray BA or BA with the arrow going the other way. So make sure you understand that subtlety. Lines are easy, segments are easy. Rays we're a little picky with. So you have to be careful with that. Okay. So what if I asked you to draw and label each of the following? Draw a line containing points R and S. And once again, maybe hit pause, draw it, and then hit play and see how you did. Okay, so we're drawing a line. It doesn't matter which way it's slanted. You could have it horizontal or vertical or slanting up or down. And then we just have to make sure that we have 2 points labeled on there. Remember, there's an infinite number of points, but you just need to have 2 of them on there. One of them's called R, and the other one's called S. Okay, we're drawing a picture of it. We're not writing the notation for this. And it doesn't matter if you put the R here and the S here. Doesn't matter, that's fine. Okay, now I'd like you to draw a segment with endpoints C and D. So pause, draw a segment, and label it. Okay, so a segment, it has 2 endpoints. There's a whole bunch of points in between, but we don't need to label those. And the endpoints are C and D. It doesn't matter which one you call C and which one you call D. All right, how about draw a plane? Now we're going to get more complicated. A plane P containing a ray with an endpoint H and a point J. I can't stress enough here, you should hit pause and try and do this first. And then go ahead and check your answer. Okay, so first I'm going to draw P, plane P, so I need a parallelogram. It could be slanted to the right or left, doesn't matter. And then I need a capital letter P in one of the corners. I tend to write it as kind of a script P so you can tell that it's not meaning a point. All right, now we need a ray inside this plane with an endpoint H and a point J. So now I need to draw a ray in here. So I don't know, I can go any direction. I'll have it, let's say it goes this way. And the end point has to be H, so I have to label that H. And then I have to have another point somewhere along there and call that J. It doesn't matter which way this ray is pointing, but the end point has to be H, and then J has to be anywhere along there. All right, so now I'm giving you a picture. Looks like we have a plane, and we have some points and some segments and rays and lines. So I want you to name a few things. So now we're going to use the notation to represent it. On this page, we were drawing the picture for what they described. Here, you have the picture. We're going to write the notation. So name a point. Well, there's a lot of correct answers here. So you can pick any of them. So you could say A, or you could have said B, or you could have said C, or you could have said D. Any one of those. You don't have to write all of them. It just says a point. Name a line. Okay, so now we're looking for a line, and so we need to have arrows on both ends. So notice, here's an arrow and here's an arrow. This one's no good because it's a point, not an arrow, so I can't use that one. So I'm going to call that line, and it has the points A and B on it. So I can say line AB and put the line symbol above the letters. So that's a line. Or you could have also said line BA. Either way works. Name a plane. This is the one that students always get wrong on a quiz. You can't just write P. You have to write the word plane and then the letter P. So plane P. Hint, hint, for a quiz coming up soon. Name a segment. You have a lot of choices here. So all I need are 2 points for a segment. Now you can see that there's no label for this one. So I have a segment here, but I can't name it because there's no letter for that last point. So I'm not going to use that one. But I could go from here to here because I have a point D and a point A. So that's a segment. I could also use this one from C to D, that's a segment. I could go from D to B, there's a segment. I could also go from A to B. So we have a lot of choices here. So you just have to list one of them. So for example, maybe I'll say segment AD and put the segment above them. Or we could have said DA. Or, and now there's a lot of possible answers here. You just had to list one. You could have said segment CD, or you could have said segment DC. Notice I'm trying to do the color coordination here. Or you could have said segment DB, or you could have said segment BD. Did I miss one? Oh, how about you could have said segment AB, or you could have called it segment BA. And that's it. Remember, you can't use the letter P though, that represents a plane, not a point. So I think I've covered most of it. All you needed was one answer though. So I'm just trying to list all the possibilities. All right, how about naming array? So for array, let's see where we see array in this picture. I see array that starts at C and goes through D and B. It's got an endpoint and it's got an arrow. So I could do that one. Now, I have to name the endpoint first and then pick one other point. I have 2 points to choose from. So you could have called it ray CD, or you could call it ray CB. Either one's fine. You couldn't say DC or BC though, because there's no arrow at C. So that would take care of that ray. You have some other options here as well. You could have, I guess, done a ray that starts at A and goes through B. That would be a possibility. You could have also done a ray that starts at B and goes through A. So that's another possibility. So I guess I should list those. So ray BA is a ray in the picture. Or you could have said ray AB. Those are different. They're not the same ray. They're referred to different rays. All right. So hopefully now you have a good idea of some of the undefined and defined terms. And so now the assignment is worksheet 1, so that PDF is in the folder in Schoology, and you need to import that into Notability, work out your answers, and when you've got, put your name at the top of the paper, and then go ahead and submit that.